Welcome to Leadership Mindsets with Kathryn Martens. I talk to all kinds of leaders about how they think. This is a chance to broaden our ideas of leadership and hear from leaders about how they successfully inspire and motivate others on a daily basis. We'll hear their stories, the joys and triumphs, and the challenges of leadership. It's my hope that as we get an insight behind the scenes of how these leaders think, and as we hear their stories of choosing bravery, humility, or morality, that we will all be inspired to reflect a little deeper about the way that we think, and we will challenge ourselves to also have healthy mindsets. My guest today is Raelle Harland, and she is the senior pastor of the Bacchus Marsh Church in Bacchus Marsh. Now, I have to confess, I did not know where Bacchus Marsh was until I met you, Raelle. I now know that it is a regional town about 50 kilometres outside of Melbourne in Victoria. So welcome, Raelle.
Thank you, Kathryn. It's lovely to be with you.
Yeah, I'm particularly excited to have you on our show today because you are a rare breed, being a senior pastor and being a woman. And also because you are not in a city. And I think as I too am not in the city, I have a particular love for anyone who's chosen to work in more of a regional or rural environment. Tell us, how did you get there? Tell us a bit about your pathway to becoming the senior pastor there at Bacchus Marsh.
Well, I'd say, Kathryn, from quite a young age, I felt a sense of a call to ministry on my life. I come from a more traditional background originally in terms of ministry. And so for me, that women still aren't actually in ministry within that movement or in that denomination. So I thought missionary. But as my life sort of moved on, I found myself in the ACC churches and just with a desire to help, started serving in places and was provided an opportunity, firstly, to be the head of kids ministry that led to being credentialed. And within a few years, as someone retired from the pastoral care position, I took that on. And I really thought in that time frame, I love serving and I love leading, but under a leader, under this, I'm number one at being a number two. That was the saying that used to go around. I'm number one at being a number two. But actually, God had other ideas and he knew. And so probably about 10 years ago now, maybe a little longer, I started to feel a stirring, but that felt really out of the box because, as you say, I'm female. And actually, up until only 2 years ago, single. So that adds another element of engagement at this level. But with some confirming thoughts from various people and an environment that's always been supportive of women, recognizing that there are challenges, they were upfront about saying you realize there will be challenges in that. I just declared that and then let it be for when God would bring that about. And about a little over 5 years ago, it's probably about 6 years ago, I started to feel the stirring after a significant season in my life, health-wise, but that God really worked spiritually with, profound season with him. I felt him saying, now's the time to step out. And what I think is most amazing is actually when the church here at Bacchus Marsh actually was, I think they were the brave people. I think they were the courageous people to say, we're willing to take on and have as our senior pastor a single woman in her 40s because we see that she is the person. It feels like a good mix of culture and heart and direction. And so 5 and a bit years ago, I started in the role.
Yeah, great. Tell us how you got to be where you are today.
Well, so Kathryn, I'd say that I always felt a sense of call to ministry. In my early years, like when I was young, I remember it being the first time, like when I was 10 and at a particular concert, telling my mum that I had that stirring. But in the background I come from denominationally, even now still women are not in ministry. So I thought missionary. But as you move and you experience that there's more, I found myself in the ACC church and I started serving and was provided an opportunity that started as kids ministry that led to me being credentialed. And then when the pastoral care person retired, I actually stepped into overseeing pastoral care at a large church in the western suburbs. And really at that point, I believed that I was that was it. Any roles that were in a church, but not the senior leadership. There was a saying going around at that stage around the idea of being number one at being a number two.
Yeah.
Had you heard that saying around that time? Or
no, but it resonates with some of my own thinking in the past.
Yeah.
Yes. And so what happened? Something must have shifted.
Well, and I really think if that had stayed that way, that would be fine. But I just started to feel a stir that maybe there was more variety or more opportunity to minister in other ways. And some people who had experience, who were on the same team, just started to say, have you ever thought about you could be good at this? And I was very fortunate to always be in a team that was encouraging, regardless of gender, regardless of even marital status. In my case, only up until about 2 years ago, I was single. So we did all this ministry journey, or the large majority of it.
Yes.
Yeah. And they were upfront that there can be challenges. I remember when I finally, in that year, it was about 10 years ago that shift started in my thinking. And I finally felt, yeah, this really is the case, and went to talk to my senior pastor. That he said, oh, of course. And I can see that. You do recognize, though, you'll be stepping into, it can be hard. Other people don't always recognize that. They don't always step in with females on that. And that can be a harder journey. So he was, and I appreciate that honesty, but I'm not saying don't do it. For me, that then having been declared could just be left. It's like, well, now that's in God's hands when the timing's right. And the timing became right 6 years ago at the end of a season of health challenges. But a year of those health challenges also was a year of incredible intimacy with God. And it just stirred me for, I have a second chance at life. And what is that? And God speaking. And it was a journey to what that place would be. But it turns out around the same time that the Bacchus Marsh Christian Church community was looking for a new pastor, a new senior pastor. And I really think they're the courageous ones, because when they met with me, they chose to go, yes, the heart and the culture and the nature and even the skill and experience that I have marries with who they are and what they're feeling called to next. And so they were willing to say yes to someone who's in their 40s, who is single and is female, having had a male pastor with their wife, and I'm coming without all of that. I think they're the courageous ones. So this is where I found myself.
You're both courageous, but it's wonderful. And I must say, I don't know if we've touched base on this, but that is one of the other similar parts to our story, in that I too was married later and was already 40, and had done quite a lot of ministry up until that point as a single person. And so you know, there's so many things we could touch on there and continue talking about together. Why don't we do that? Let's dig into, I think, that whole piece around self-management, because one of the things that seems to be a common theme, and you and I have personally experienced it, but I know that there's plenty of others out there as well who are single, both men and women, who are pouring their heart into ministry, that they're actually at a high risk of burnout because they don't have someone else saying, well, come on, darling, let's go and do this fun thing with the family. And their whole world is often then kind of absorbed by their ministry. And they have, it is not always, there's different age groups, of course, but sometimes it is in the younger years when you think you've got all this energy, so I'll just devote it to pouring my heart out for Jesus. But can you tell us a little bit about how you look after yourself? What has those years taught you in terms of self-care?
Well, because you do find yourself in overload, don't you? And both, I remember having a conversation a few years ago, not even just with a person in ministry, they were a teacher in a school, friends. We'd been friends since we were in primary school together, actually, about how you could get to, you were doing well if you got to September or October before you went and you'd had enough and you were tired. More often than not, it was June or July and you had a meltdown of some sort or an energy burnout, and that we weren't able to get through our year. That had happened to me a lot in my 20s and 30s. And that's not healthy. And you hear too many stories of all sorts of people, single and married who just burn out in their 30s or early 40s. And I just had this strong sense, I want to be in this for the rest of my life. I want to be available for whatever God wants me to do. Off the back of that health thing, that was actually, I was diagnosed with stage 3 aggressive breast cancer in 2016, was this acknowledgement that I want to live a long time. Here, I know I get to live forever with God. I'm looking forward to that. And so there was something I knew I'd always enjoyed when I was younger, which was aerobics. But at my size, that's a little bit more challenging for the impact. And I'd heard about Pilates. I'd done a little bit when things had gone wrong with my body. And I just committed to going along to a Pilates classes. It started 18 months ago, once a week. I now am doing it twice a week. And when I have the space, 3 times a week. And it's so good, not just for my body, but even for my mental well-being. It's been a huge blessing.
Oh, there's lots of research now that confirms the connection between our physical health and the amount we exercise and our mental health. And I can testify to the same thing. I don't do Pilates anymore, though I've done in the past, but I have a gym that I go to, and I know that my mental health starts declining if I don't keep going. Or even just walks with the dog, swims in the ocean, just some sort of physical movement where I'm not, having to do it. I just doing it for my own sense of well-being.
And I think the power in that is that that's also a responsibility break, which we think we don't need in leadership sometimes because we love what we do. But actually to have a break from that, even to interact with people, if you are at a gym or in a club, like in my case, it's at the most 4 or 5 people. It's taken some time, but now there's a listening to their stories and just not being anything other than the other person who does this in the room is also actually a really lovely mental break.
Yeah, there's time out.
What's become important is to have time where there is not checking emails, and where I love going to cafes. I love having coffee with people. It'd be easy to think that because I'm doing that with people in my church or for ministry reasons, that's meeting my need. But I still have to be, even when it's fully relational and engaging, it's still a part of me switched on within that role. So it becomes really important to connect with people who are not connected to ministry life in any way, shape, or form. Even if there's still ministry that happens, because you're person to person, they do to you, you do to them. But I'm not required. Well, required sounds like such a terrible word, but there's an element where you just automatically do switch on. Yeah, so that becomes key.
Yeah.
Sorry?
It's a good expression, the switching on. It's like that sense of being on, meaning I'm at work. Even when it's a ministry and even when it's relational and pastoral, you've kind of taken on the cloak of that moment. It's like,
absolutely,
there's like a mental uniform you almost put on.
Yeah.
Where you switch yourself on. And you have to have times when you're also off.
Yes.